there do I see my mother. Oh, there do I see my father. Oh, there do they call to me.
So for those of you who have been playing or watching God of War, I'm sure that you have a host of questions, and today we'll attempt to answer one that is undoubtedly near the top of your list. Who exactly is Atreus' mother? Over the course of this video, we'll explore who she was in the game, and how those depictions differed and compared to those of Norse mythology. As will be common with most of my God of War videos, they will contain spoilers, so if you do not want to be spoiled then I urge you to please click away. We first see Atreus' mother near the very beginning of the game, in quite an emotional scene, where Atreus essentially says goodbye to his mother, performing some kind of funeral rites before her body is cremated. In the game she is referred to as Faye, and we're led to believe that she was a mortal woman, making Atreus a demigod, but as the game progresses, we quickly learn that Faye had been concealing her true nature from her family, for reasons unknown to us. With Kratos spending most of his time away from home, Atreus would spend most of his days with his mother. It was because of Faye that Atreus began to use a bow, as she taught her son how to hunt and track prey. We're not exactly told how Faye died, but it's something that will surely be touched upon later on in the series, and we can make the assumption that her death may not have been from natural causes. We learn that Faye was in fact a giant from the realm of Jotunheim, and when Kratos and Atreus eventually travel to Jotunheim, they see a collection of murals and inscriptions on the wall, where Faye had previously prophesied everything that would happen in the game. In these markings, Atreus is referred to as Loki, and Kratos does reveal that that was the name his mother wanted for him, but instead they went with Atreus, a fallen comrade and friend of Kratos when he served in the Spartan army. We now know that Atreus is half god and half Jotun, or giant as it's commonly referred to in the game, but there is still so much mystery that surrounds Faye and her intentions for her son and her husband. When Faye's ashes are eventually scattered in Jotunheim, Mimir suggests that Atreus and Kratos may have brought about Ragnarok 100 years earlier than expected. So now that we have a rough idea of how she appears in the game, we can compare and contrast these depictions to that of Norse mythology. So to start off, Loki's mother in Norse mythology does not go by the name Faye, but instead she is referred to as Laufey, or Luivey as it's pronounced in Icelandic, with Loki sometimes being referred to as Laufeyjarson, meaning Laufey's son. It would seem that God of War definitely took some influence from this name. I assume they shortened it to Faye in an attempt to keep it simple and easy to remember. There are a few accounts where she was instead referred to as Null, and some believe that this meant needle, which would relate to depictions of her as slender and weak. Depictions that certainly contrast what we see in the game. When we first meet Sindri, he describes her as a strong woman and a fierce warrior, and any other character to refer to Faye generally does so in high regard. To clear up a very common misconception that many have from the Marvel comics and movies, Loki's biological father was not Odin. Of course in the game that role belongs to Kratos, but in traditional Norse mythology his father was Farabuti, which in Norse meant cruel hitter or fierce striker. It's thought that Laufey itself could possibly mean full of leaves or even pine needles, which meant that many interpreted Loki's birth as a fierce strike of lightning, hitting the leaves and needles at the bottom of a tree, causing fire to rise. Loki was not Laufey's only child. She had two more sons, Bylestir and Helblindi, and although they don't really feature much in Norse mythology, Helblindi's name suggests that he was either blind or enjoyed poking out the eyes of others. Depictions of Laufey are very brief and ambiguous. Some believe that she was a goddess and others that she was a Jotun or a giant. Where God of War makes it very clear within the game that she was a giant from the realm of Jotunheim, it's important to note that not all Jotuns were giants. They came in all shapes and forms. So in short, we don't actually know what Loki's mother looked like, and it does raise some interesting questions that the game will have to answer regarding how she was able to conceal her appearance if she was a giant, and why she left Jotunheim. It's interesting to see what direction they take with Faye in future games, as there aren't many descriptive depictions of her, giving them free rein to experiment without having to worry about upsetting too many people. Another fairly noticeable comparison that we can make between game and mythology is that Laufey was a name connected with nature, something we somewhat see in the game, as it was Faye who taught Atreus how to hunt and track animals, and perhaps her connection with nature is something that will be explored in future God of War installments. Because of the lack of surviving texts and sources surrounding Loki's mother and father, it's very hard to make any real comparisons between how they feature in the game and how they feature in Norse mythology. But I'd love to hear what you guys think, and how you'd like to see Faye depicted in future games. Feel free to share any thoughts and ideas with me in the comments below.